Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to read a fairy tale from England. And the fairy tale that I chose was Two Princesses. So let's start. The Two Princesses. There was there were there was once a king who had one daughter, and she was called Anne. Her eyes were dark, and her hair was long and golden, and people used to like looking up upon her. When Anne was 14, her mother died. When 2 years had passed, the king married for a second time. His wife had also had a daughter, and her name was Kate Middleton. Was Kate. Kate's eyes were not beautiful, but they were merry. Her hair was short and of a milky blonde color. She was pleasant and kind and good. Soon the two girls were fast friends. They loved each other and spent all their time together, walking in the mid-downs, reading the same books, and enjoying everything that went on about the king's castle. But the new queen was a jealous woman. She saw that her stepdaughter, Anne, was beautiful, while her own daughter was not. Kate was pleasant enough to look at, and by herself she might be thought beautiful, but when she was with Anne, as usually she was, people did not look at her as they looked at Anne. So the queen began to hate her stepdaughter and tried to think of some way in which she could spoil her beauty. One day, as she was walking in her apartments, beating her nails in restless spite, she thought of the old hen wife who lived near the castle gate. This was an old woman who lived in a tiny cottage and looked after the hens who laid the egg that were sent to the castle kitchen. "I will go and talk to the hen wife," said the queen to herself. "She is a clever woman, and is thought to have magical powers." Now the queen had never been to the hen wife's cottage before, but she knew the way. So wrapping her cloak about her, she set out and was soon knocking at the old woman's door. "Old woman," she said, as soon as she was inside, "they tell me you can do marvelous things, but I don't believe them. My stepdaughter is far more beautiful than is good for her, and is becoming proud and vain. So far you have only been paid for your eggs in silver, but if you can tell me a way of spoiling my stepdaughter's beauty just a little, to teach her a lesson, I will pay for every egg that you send with a piece of gold." "Nothing could be simple," said the old hen wife. "Call that a tax? Why, that's hardly worth my troubling about. Send the princess to me in the morning, and you shall see what I can do." "Very well," answered the queen. "The princess will be here first thing in the morning. Only," said the hen wife, "you must remember one thing. Not a bite must she eat, and not a drop must she drink before she comes. Otherwise, I can do nothing." "Not a drop will she drink, nor a bite will she eat," said the queen. "I will not forget." So saying, she was gone. Next morning, the queen stopped her stepdaughter as she was on her way to breakfast. "Good morning, child," she said. "You are looking pale, and a little air before breakfast will give you an appetite. For breakfast you shall have a new laid egg, or perhaps two if you go and fetch them quickly. Run down to the hen's wife cottage at once and ask her for some eggs." So Anne ran off towards the cottage, but on the way she went through the castle kitchen, and there she was a crust of bread lying on the table. So being hungry like me, for she had had no breakfast, she snatched up the crust and ran with it to the castle gate, eating it as she went. Presently she reached the old woman's tiny cottage, with its one chimney smoking straight up into the morning sky. She knocked at the door, and the old woman let her in. "You are early, my dear," said the hen wife. "What do you want?" "If you please," said Anne, "I have come for some new laid eggs." "Well, just step over there, lift the lid of that pot, and see what you find inside." The cottage was dark, and Anne did not notice that the hen wife had a cunning smile on her pinched and wrinkled face. She went across to the cooking stove, on which she was standing a round, black pot with a lid on. She lifted the lid and looked in, but nothing happened. Then the hen's wife cunning smile vanished, but she did now show her annoyance. "Go home, my dear," she said, "and tell your stepmother to keep the leather locked in the future." Anne thought it was a strange message, but she did not stop any longer, and she went back to the castle. Next day the queen decided to try again. "Daughter," she said, "you are looking pale, and the morning air will do you good. Go down to the hen's wife cottage and ask her for some new laid eggs." Eggs. Off went Anne once more. This time there was no crust on the kitchen table, but passing through a field, passing through a field where men were working, she noticed that they were gathering peas. She talked pleasantly to them, and they gave her a handful of the peas. She was glad enough to eat them on her way, for she had no breakfast, and the morning air was fresh. Presently she came to the hen's wife cottage. Once more she asked for eggs. "You step over there, my dear," said the old woman. "Look inside that pot and see what you can find." Anne did as she was told. She lifted the lid on the round black pot, and once again nothing happened. "Go home," said the hen wife, "and tell the queen that the pot won't boil if the fire's away." Anne went back to the castle and told her stepmother what the old woman had said. The queen at once understood by this that Anne must once again have found something to eat on the way to the old woman's cottage, even though she had gone there before breakfast. This time she determined to go with her and see that she had nothing to eat. So next morning the queen and the princess set off together. Anne had had nothing to eat since she got up. When they reached the cottage and asked for more new laid eggs, once again the hen wife told Anne to look in the pot. She did so, and this time This time out popped a sheep's head and fastened itself on Anne's shoulders instead of her own. Yeah, so she's not Anne, she's Anne. Anne. She is Anne, like me. There, said the old woman gleefully. She won't she won't be quite so proud of her pretty face now. No, said the queen. People won't look at her in quiet the way they used to. Will they? Perhaps they'll look a little more kindly at my Kate from now on. I must admit you were as good as your word, old woman. Here are the golden guineas, I promise you. She handed a purse to the henwife and set out with her stepdaughter to the castle. When they got there, everyone was horror struck to see what had happened to Anne. Gone were her lovely gold tresses, her dark eyes and rosy cheeks. Instead, how silly she looked with her red sheep's face surrounded by woolly fleeces. When Kate saw her stepsister, she burst out crying. "Oh, my pretty dear," she said, "what has happened?" Nobody knew, of course, except for the queen, and she said nothing. Poor Anne could only make ba-ing noises like a sheep. "Hi, Anne." "Hi." "We must get help," said Kate to herself. This will never do. Somewhere there must be someone able to give my sister back her own face and her lovely hair. So when there was no one in sight, she covered Anne's head in a thick white shawl, put on her own cloak and bonnet, and set off with Anne into the wide world. At last, when the two sisters were almost worn out with weariness and night was coming on, they reached another castle. They knocked at the gates and were soon let in. Presently, a lady in waiting came to see what they wanted. Kate told her they had lost their way and wanted to shelter for the night. "I don't know whether you can stop here," said the lady in waiting. "Everyone is very worried, for one of the princes of the prince has been sick for a long time, and no one can cure him." My sister is too. My sister is sick too," said Kate. "Oh, please let us in. We will do no one any harm." Well, the lady in waiting was sorry for the princesses, and she liked the way Kate spoke and looked. So she went to see the sick prince's father and mother, who were king and queen in that part of the country. Presently she returned. "Well," she said, "I have talked to their majesty, and you may stop in the castle on one condition." "Oh, anything," said Kate eagerly. "I will do anything if only my poor sister and I can stay." So the lady in waiting told Kate that she must sit up and nurse the sick prince whom no one could cure. "If you do this," she added, "you may stay the night, and you will be given a purse full of silver for your trouble. But there is one difficulty which I must tell you of. Many have sat up at night to nurse the prince, but in the middle of the night each one has disappeared. You run a great risk. Will you do it?" "Oh, yes," said Kate without hesitation. "I'm sure nothing will happen to me. That's brave." So it was agreed. Kate took her sister upstairs to the room where the prince lay ill. She and Anne were brought food and drink, and the lady in waiting left them for the night. All was quiet until the great bell in the castle tower sounded the stroke of midnight. Then the prince got up, put on his clothes, and went softly downstairs. Kate left her sister asleep in a corner near the fire and followed the prince. He fetched his horse from the stable and called to his hound. Then he jumped up on the horse, and Kate jumped up behind him. With the hound leading the way, they rode out of the castle yard. On, on and on they rode through the moonlight country, till they presently entered a thick wood. As they brushed past the trees and bushes, Kate put out her hand and gathered ripe nuts, with which she filled her pockets. Presently they left the wood and approached a steep green hillside. Here the hound stopped and sniffed the ground, and the prince reined in his horse. "Open, open, green hill," cried he, "and let in the young prince get his horse and his hound." A door in the hillside opened, and the prince rode in. There was a song of music and merriment from a great lighted hall. It was the hall of the fairies, and a magnificent ball was in progress. The princess got down from his horse. Kate jumped up too, and hid herself behind the door to watch what went on. No one noticed her. Gaily and happily the prince danced, first with one fairy and then another, stepping in stately manner down the long hall, or whirling madly round between the great columns, while the fairy band, playing in the sweetness and gayness stones. I thought he was sick. So the hours passed. Then all at once the cock crew, and the prince left off dancing and called for his horse. He leapt into the saddle, and Kate leapt up behind him. Then the hound led them out of the hall under the hill, and they were once more galloping back towards the castle. In the morning, when the castle servants came in to draw the curtains, make up the fire, and bring breakfast, they found Kate sitting beside the fireplace, cracking nuts, and the prince sleeping peacefully in bed. "Has he had a good night?" they asked. "He had a very good night," answered Kate. She was given her purse full of silver, and asked if she would sit up and watch for a second night. "Yes, indeed," she answered, "but this time I must have a piece of gold." This was agreed to, and that night Kate and her sister stayed with the prince as before. And when the great clock sounded midnight, once more the prince rose up and went downstairs and brought out his horse and his hound, and mounted the horse with Kate behind him. Once more they sped through the lanes and fields, and once more Kate plucked nuts in the thick wood and stuffed them in her pocket. They came again to the green hill, and the prince called out, "Open, open, green hill, and let in the young prince and his horse and his hound." Once more the hillside opened, and the prince rode in. It was just the same as before, only if anything the music was sweeter and gayer, and the lights brighter, and the dancer more lively and nimble. Kate hid herself behind the door and watched. How beautiful the fairies were with their long dresses of floating silver and gold clothes, rose-colored silk, white satin, and embroidered gauze. And how handsome and gallant were the tall cavaliers who steered them through the mazes of dances. Once more the prince grew weary with the mad dancing, though he looked happy and carefree. Kay looked down and noticed that a baby fairy was playing near her feet with a silver wand, and she overheard two fairies talking close by. One of them said, "One touch of that wand will cure the princess' sick sister." Kay said nothing, but as soon as the fairies were not looking, she began to roll some of her nuts towards the baby fairy. The baby laughed with delight, and put out her hands to catch the nuts. Presently she had forgotten all about the silver wand, for silver wands are much commoner toys to fairy babies than they are not human children's. Kay picked up the wand and hid it beneath her cloak. Soon afterward the cock crew, and the prince jumped on his horse with Kate behind him, and off they rode through the fading moonlight. And, and when the castle servants came as usual in the morning to the prince's room, there was the prince asleep in bed, and Kate sitting at the fire cracking nuts. "Has the prince had a good night?" they asked. "A very good night," Kate answered. When Anne awoke, Kate took away the shawl that covered her woolly sheep's head, and touched her lightly with the silver wand that she had brought from the hall under the hill. Instantly the sheep's head vanished, and there was Anne's once more, just as she had been before her cruel stepmother had sent her to the henwife cottage. There were her own dark eyes, her smooth cheeks, and her low golden hair. "Oh, Kate," she said, "I feel as if I've had a dream." "Do you?" said Kate. "Well, perhaps you have. Now let us have some breakfast, for you must be hungry. As for me, well, I'm so hungry, I feel as if I could eat a sheep's head." Every was the lie when Kate told them that her sick sister was cured, and Anne went off to talk to the castle ladies and the prince's brother and sister. But their majesty were sad that their eldest son was still sick, and they asked Kate if she would stay yet another night. After all, the prince was no worse, and Kate had not disappeared in the night, as all the other nurses had done, so perhaps she would be able to cure him in the end. So they gave Kate her purse full of gold and asked her to sit up another night. "Why, yes, I will," said Kate, "only this time, if I do not disappear, you must let me marry the prince, for you know," she added, "I am princess by myself, and well worthy of such a husband." So the prince's father promised Kate she would marry the prince if she could cure him. That's weird. "After all," he said to the queen, "if she can nurse him and cure him when no one else can, I dare say she'll make him the best wife too." Well, that's right. So it was agreed, and once more Kay stayed and watched over the sleeping prince. I think maybe the prince was in shade. Maybe. So it was, for the third time, the same thing happened. At midnight, when all the castle was asleep, the prince got up, dressed, mounted his horse with Kate behind him, and galloped off towards the green hill. For the third time, when the hound led them along the narrow track through the woods, Kate gathered nuts to eat in the morning. Open, open, Green Hill, and let in the young prince and his coat and his hound. For the third time, Kate heard the words of the prince. The fairies' hall was as bright and splendid as ever, and the prince danced gaily and happily with all the fairies who came and crowded round him. And Kate, in her corner behind the door, watches as the evening wore on. She noticed a second fairy baby playing with a bird, and she overheard one fairy saying to another, "3 bites of that bird will cure the sick prince." So this time, Kate rolled all her nuts for the baby to play with, and in a few minutes it had grown tired of playing with the bird, and was only interested in rolling the nuts about and trying to crack them between its gums. Quickly, Kate took off the bird and put it carefully in the pocket of her cloak. A cock crowed. They set off once more for the castle, and down the prince was asleep as usual, but Kate was cracking nuts this time, for she had given them all to the fairy baby. Besides, she had something more important to do. As soon as she reached the castle, she had killed and plucked the bear, as well as now as and was now cooking it in a pot over the fire. And she killed the bear. Why she killed the bear? I don't understand. A delicious smell began to rise and fill the air, and that the prince awoke and asked what it came from. Kate told him. "Ah," said the prince, "if I only could have just one bite of that bird." She gave him a bite, and he rose up on one elbow. "I feel better," said he. "Now, if I could have just one more bit from that bird." So Kate gave him a second bite, and this time he sat up and leaned against the pillows. "I feel better still," he said. "Oh, if I could have just one bit more." So Kate gave him a third bite, and this he was completely cured as well as ever he was. He got up of bed and put on his clothes. When the servants came as usual, he was sitting beside Kate in front of the fire, and they had finished off the bird together and were chatting and laughing happily. Everyone was delighted to see the prince quite well again. All say how clever and kind Kate had been, and what a good wife she would make for the prince. And of course the prince agreed. So preparations were made for the wedding. Meanwhile, the prince's younger brother, had seen Anne, and had instantly fallen in love with her, as everyone did who saw her. So it was agreed that they two should be married. A wonderful banquet was held, and all the noble men and women of the country were invited. And the sick prince married the princess who has well, and the sick princess married the sick prince brother. The sick prince and princess were ill no more, and nor did Kay and the prince ever visit the fairies' hall under the hill. Instead, instead, they lived happily ever afterwards. But the dancing went on as before under the hill, and the fairy babies grew up and never wondered what had become of the one and the little bear, but whom they danced with when they grew up, and what colored dresses they wore, and whether the music was tuneful as ever, that I cannot tell. Interesting. Rumor has it the name of the prince was maybe Charles. Well, thank you for hearing me. I wanted to do an ASMR, but I can't because my family are doing some reparation and doing some stuff downstairs here in my home. So yeah, so that's why you maybe hear some noises. And yeah, this is not ASMR, but as I tell you, or did I not tell you? I can't remember, but I will tell you again. The aim of recording these videos is to practice my English. I don't have family that speak English fluently, so I just wanted to learn and I just want to get better and improve my English in reading. And yeah, I hope you like it. Please comment if you don't know a word or you don't understand a word that I said before. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.